Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi everyone, and welcome to another Woke Wednesday. This podcast was created to shed light on different societal issues which have been at the forefront of public discourse through one of the most divisive times in American history. More so, it was created with the intent of allowing those that have often been neglected, shunned, or misunderstood to have a chance to share their experiences and thoughts. I hope this dialogue encourages critical conversation and activism amongst all listeners. And I hope you'll tell all your friends about it and share it on your social platforms. Rapper 21 Savage was recently arrested by ICE after allegations swirled that the 26-year-old had been living in the country illegally for a majority of his life after his visa expired in 2006. Of course, his fans and people in general went crazy because if you know anything about him, then you know he's always claimed Atlanta as his home, which technically it is. So, confusion naturally was most people's reaction. However, his lawyers did later confirm that he was born in London and came to the States at the age of 7. So naturally, him claiming Atlanta as his hometown makes sense because it's the only place he's only known from childhood until now. Questions surrounding how on earth 21 Savage just popped up on ICE's radar, being that he was literally arrested and convicted of felony drug charges in 2014, which would indicate that they should have known about his citizenship status then, and not 5 years later. Moreover, 21's lawyers have released statements that the rapper applied for a visa back in 2017 and was waiting to hear back, which, again, would mean that ICE was well aware of his status, which raises the question, why did they decide to arrest him now? Why wait almost 5 years to arrest him, especially being that he now has 3 kids here and a fiance? His arrest is particularly interesting because we're seeing the intersection of race in terms of being black coexisting with other identities such as immigration in this case. After 21's arrest, social media flooded with memes making light of his situation and essentially demonizing and diminishing his blackness because he's originally from Europe and not the States. The mocking comments show a lack of full recognition of how often ICE's policies target black immigrants and how hurtful they can be. Not to mention, just the overall lack of human empathy is disgusting. Blackness is not solely exclusive to being born in America, and unfortunately, social media told a very different story after his arrest. We cannot and should not view race and immigration as mutually exclusive. They both simultaneously play an impactful part in how people are treated in this country and who you see being targeted by ICE more than others. 21 is definitely not a danger to the American community, and he shouldn't be treated as such. He's a wonderful example of hard work, dedication, and giving back. He consistently puts on back-to-school drives for Atlanta communities, puts on financial literacy classes for those in his community, and does so much more. And like I said before, he has 3 kids and a fiance. They don't deserve to have their father and their fiance ripped away from them. Families deserve to be together. Not surprisingly, my girl, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, spoke out against the arrest of the rapper and has been adamant on her position of abolishing ICE because of their continuous, systematic violations of human rights. She also responded back to Fox and Friends' piece on her position concerning ICE after an undocumented MS-13 member murdered someone in her community back in New York City. She responded via Twitter by saying, "Unlike these people, I actually care about my community. This happened across from my old campaign office. We've been monitoring this heartbreaking situation and have been working with the community to heal." Meanwhile, ICE is detaining children, political activists, and 21 Savage. She was not at all diminishing that death, but simply pointing out that just because someone without documentation commits an atrocity, that doesn't negate the fact that this harmful, government-funded agency is infringing upon documented and undocumented people's fundamental human rights, time and time again. The agency has a very long history of racial profiling and is broken down on a systemic level, putting the lives of individuals and their entire families in the hands of those who do not respect them as legitimate human beings, which prevents them from achieving dignified lives.
Here, a city that has been one of the safest in the United States of America for 20 years and counting, safe long before a wall was built here in 2008. In fact, a little less safe after that wall was built. We can show the rest of the country as we make our stand here together tonight that walls do not make us safer. Walls will require us to take someone's property, their house, their farm, their ranch, to build a wall at a time of record low northbound apprehensions, at a time that El Paso is not the outlier in the cities of the border. In fact, if you look at McAllen, if you look at San Diego, if you look at all points in between, the U.S. cities of the U.S. Mexico border are far safer than the U.S. cities deeper in the interior of the United States of America. We know that walls do not save lives. Walls end lives. In the last 10 years, more than 4,000 children, women, and men have died trying to come to this country, to work jobs that no one will take, to be with a family member, to flee horrific brutality and violence and death in their home countries. And as we build these walls, 600 miles of the 2,000-mile border walled up and counting, we push them to ever more treacherous and remote stretches of the U.S. Mexico border, thereby ensuring greater suffering and death. We stand for America, and we stand against walls.
What's also interesting concerning immigration and border security is that Beto O'Rourke is also holding a rally at the same time in his hometown of El Paso, Texas, as Donald Trump's rally to attack misinformation and misperception of the borderlands with Mexico. I thought about going, but y'all, I Googled the distance and it's literally 8 hours from Houston. Texas is too damn big and I am not driving 8 hours. As much as I love Beto, I'm not driving 8 hours for that. That is too long. I wholeheartedly support what he is doing, but they won't see me there. I'll just be in spirit.
Let's play a game. Let's play a lightning round game. I'm going to be the bad guy, which I'm sure half the room would agree with anyway. And I want to get away with as much bad things as possible, ideally to enrich myself and advance my interest, even if that means putting my interests ahead of the American people. So, if I want to run a campaign that is entirely funded by corporate political action committees, is there anything that legally prevents me from doing that?
No.
So let's say I'm a really, really bad guy, and let's say I have some skeletons in my closet that I need to cover up so that I can get elected. Mr. Smith, is it true that you wrote this article, this opinion piece for the Washington Post entitled, "These payments to women were unseemly, that doesn't mean they were illegal"?
Well, I can't see the piece, but I wrote a piece under that headline in the Post, so I assume that's right.
Okay, great. So, green light for hush money. I can do all sorts of terrible things. It's totally legal right now for me to pay people off. So, I use my special interest dark money funded campaign to pay off folks that I need to pay off and get elected. So, now I'm elected, now I'm in. I've got the power to draft, lobby, and shape the laws that govern the United States of America. Are there any limits on the laws that I can write or influence?
There's no limit.
So there's none. So I can be totally funded by oil and gas. I can be totally funded by Big Pharma, come in, write Big Pharma laws, and there's no limits to that whatsoever.
That's right.
The last thing I want to do is get rich with as little work possible. That's really what I'm trying to do as the bad guy, right? So is there anything preventing me from holding stocks, say, in an oil or gas company, and then writing laws to deregulate that industry and cause, that could potentially cause the stock value to soar and accrue a lot of money in that time?
You could do that.
So I could do that. I could do that now with the way our current laws are set up. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is it possible that any elements of this story apply to our current government and our current public servants right now?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have a system that is fundamentally broken. We have these influences existing in this body, which means that these influences are here in this committee shaping the questions that are being asked of you all right now. Would you say that that's correct,
Yes.
Mr. Marabani or Mr. Schaub?
Yes. In terms of laws that apply to the president, yeah, there's just almost no laws at all that apply to the president.
So I'm being held, and every person in this body is being held to a higher ethical standard than the President of the United States.
That's right, because there are some ethics committee rules that apply to you.
And it's already super legal, as we've seen, for me to be a pretty bad guy. So it's even easier for the President of the United States to be one, I would assume.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
In some other hopeful news, my girl, again, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, challenged the House Oversight Committee in a game in which she shed light on corrupt financial campaign laws. She essentially pointed out the ethical implications of political action committees funding campaigns and then the constituents that are elected to office now having the power to write different laws and policies that benefit only the constituents and those corporations that help fund these campaigns in the first place. She is truly a force to be reckoned with, and I truly appreciate her constantly putting her best foot forward with the lens of thinking of the American people first. Last on my current events topics to talk about, Virginia. The state of Virginia is currently in utter chaos as we speak. Ralph Northam, the governor, recently had a photo resurface that has placed on his yearbook picture in med school of two people, one in blackface and the other in a KKK robe. Now, Northam originally apologized for the photo. Then he flipped the script and claimed he'd never taken the photo, never even seen the yearbook, and he wasn't even at the party. Many are calling for his resignation as governor, but as far as we can tell, Northam remains adamant that he has no interest in doing so and is going to focus on racial issues by reading Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I'm sorry, but that's a fucking joke. Him reading a few books, and I'm not saying Ta-Nehisi Coates, I love him, he's a great author, but him reading a few books does not discount the fact that there is literally a picture on his yearbook page in med school of someone in blackface and someone in a KKK robe. Bye. Northam has to go, and that's just the end of it. If he were to resign, then next in the line of succession would be Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. However, two women came forward with sexual assault allegations against him. One of these women has gone so far to say that she's willing to testify at impeachment proceedings and is fully cooperating with law enforcement in order to have her claim investigated. In this case as well, many are calling for his resignation. He needs to resign as well. Point blank, period. If you thought the worst of it was over, then unfortunately, you're wrong. Because in the midst of all of this, Attorney General Mark Herring admitted to appearing in blackface at a college party, although there's no photos currently circulating of that party. Either way, the whole state of Virginia is in a frenzy, and there truly needs to be a removal of those placed in office to govern us that cannot do so because of ethical, racist, predatory behaviors. Throughout U.S. history, there have been predators and rapists and racists representing the American people in public office. So the question then becomes, what will the line be? What can be bad enough to prevent someone from ever working again? Which also contributes to an individual living a dignified life alongside marginalized people who have been most impacted by bigoted politicians. Should we be fighting fire with fire or using certain instances as points of growth? Obviously, it's a case-by-case situation that has to be decided in the court of public opinion, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Either way, Virginia just needs to get their shit all the way together, and that's just the end of that. And I said what I said earlier, they all gotta go, period. They need to go. And that's just the end of that. Switching gears a little bit. As a history teacher, I obviously teach my subject in terms of a timeline, because in order to understand what's happening in 2019, then you need to understand and critically analyze what happened in the 1600s to comprehend why we are the way we are today. The first thing I naturally focus on is the concept of European colonization. In modern terms, some people might refer to this as immigration. Immigration has been a hotly contested topic more recently, being that our president literally wants a wall on the U.S. Mexico border and believes that those coming from Mexico are rapists and criminals, and those coming from African and Caribbean countries are coming from shithole countries. Immigration and colonization are not just recent phenomenons. They're embedded in our history. I'm choosing to focus on immigration in this episode because I know from conversations and from the media there's misconceptions concerning this issue. I don't want you to assume this episode is going to be some boring history lesson, but I do feel it's crucial that we look at our history of immigration and domination for this episode. Now, most of us probably learned in school that the exploration for new land was brought on by the need to spread God, attain glory, and gold, right? They also teach you that Europeans first discovered America. Well, what they often don't teach you in schools are getting better about this, is that you can't discover something that was never lost to begin with. Native Americans were on this land long before Europeans, Africans, and other people groups were. Yet, if we fast forward to present day, we often see Native Americans forgotten about or thrown to the side in terms of who our policies are benefiting and who's making them in the first place. I mean, hello, we literally just elected the first Native American women to Congress ever. Obviously, I'm thrilled for this, but why did it take for so long that their ancestors who cultivated and shaped this land into what it is today to have a speaking part and a voice in how these policies and laws will shape the American people moving forward? The concept of immigration and people's perspective on it honestly intrigues me, being that if you want to get technical about it, all of us belong to communities that immigrated here either through choice or force, with the exception, of course, of the Native Americans. Although some Native Americans migrated here during one of the major ice ages, indicating that we do in fact come from a common biological ancestor, probably in Africa. So yes, evolution does exist, even though there are obviously some questions we'll never know with regards to creation. Regardless, we are all the same human, no matter where we originate from. European domination in America started with the colonization of the land and the original people. mass genocide, mass enslavement, and displacement of different communities. While obviously these different communities work to overcome their situations, we still see the repercussions of those choices today.
Immigrants. A word that's too often followed by
criminals, illegal immigrant criminals. They've got to respect American law.
They do not pay taxes.
And they're taking your jobs.
perceptions or facts. Let's take a look at what the numbers tell us. First assertion. Immigrants increase the crime rate. Sure, an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants are in violation of American immigration policies. But overall, FBI data shows that over a span of 20 years, crime has dropped. Violent crime in particular has almost halved. All while the undocumented immigrant population tripled. Last year, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement removed 139,368 undocumented immigrants that were previously convicted of a crime. Then there's the view that undocumented immigrants are taking jobs from Americans. It's argued they're willing to accept lower wages and poor working conditions. But the data shows it may be more about skills. It's estimated that 8.1 million undocumented immigrants are working or looking for work, which is about 5.1% of the nation's labor force. Yet, in specific jobs like farming, cleaning and maintenance, and construction, undocumented workers make up much larger percentages of each sector. And they're more likely to do those jobs because they don't necessarily require fluency in English or a high school or college diploma. Because 47% of undocumented immigrants have less than a high school education, while only 8% of U.S.-born residents have not graduated from high school. That's why native-born, low-skilled workers are likely to be cashiers, truck drivers, and waiters. So what about the claim that undocumented immigrants aren't paying any taxes? Well, they actually pay more than $11 billion each year in sales, property, and income taxes. Wait, income tax? That's right. Many undocumented immigrants have ITIN numbers and feed into the tax system that way. And if the U.S. legalized all those immigrant statuses, the additional taxes they would pay would be an estimated $2 billion for roads, schools, and services. That's more than some tax-avoiding Americans, right?
Fast forward to a more modern-day context, the phenomenon is still happening and more rapidly as we speak. In 2017, immigrants constituted nearly 14% of the U.S. population. That's wonderful in my personal opinion, because the more and more we diversify our culture, the more innovative ideas we will have, the better the economy will be. And yes, undocumented immigrants pay taxes too, billions worth to be exact, and so much more. And if you didn't know this, native-born people are more likely to commit crimes than immigrants. So, in actuality, Donald Trump is very wrong in his assertions that all of the people crossing the border are just engaging in more and more crime. What's even more amazing to me is the long, expensive process the U.S. requires people to go through in order to gain documentation. It's not easy to gain citizenship here, nor is it quick. Thousands of dollars due to legal and application fees go into becoming a citizen of the U.S., and it can take between several months and years to get approved / go through all of the correct steps. It's expensive, it's long, it's exhausting. It makes sense that many might not choose to go this route, not in hopes of trying to scam anyone or get one over on anyone, but you have to realize that people coming to the U.S. are often in search of economic stability for them and their families, which results in more often than not being able to afford the process to do it legally. Another misconception on immigration that I've seen concerns seeking asylum. Seeking asylum is not illegal. However, turning away asylum seekers is illegal, if you weren't aware. Asylum is the protection granted by a nation to someone who has left their native country as a political refugee. Those seeking asylum go through long, extensive processes of background checks and interviews before they're granted it. Recognizing that the process of immigration is not something that happens overnight and is given at a cost-friendly price could really benefit people that have a negative bias towards immigrants. Having empathy for the people that choose to come on long, dangerous journeys in search of a new start is honestly the least we could do as humans to extend to others. Staying up to date with what's happening in regards to immigration policies like DACA is also key, because you never know who you might either be friends with or interact with on a daily basis that could be adversely affected if these types of policies are rescinded. While I'm not saying there isn't a need for border security, there does need to be actually accessible means of entering the country legally without multi-billion-dollar walls. But even if people do choose to enter the country illegally, I think that recognizing how our country prides itself on being the land of opportunity and growth for all is a major catalyst for why people choose to come here in the first place, which many do so by any means necessary, legal or not. Dignifying these people who choose sacrifice for the safety and security of themselves and their families is the least we as a society could do. Having misconceptions and negative presuppositions about those that are unlike ourselves does nothing but breed hate and spread misinformation. I hope this episode was informative and thought-provoking for all that listened and for those that will listen in the future. I hope that you all begin looking at immigration with a lens of inspiration and compassion, because real-world people are demonized because of an unwillingness on many people's part to see what the other side is like. Real human beings live behind the horrific and ugly pictures that our current presidential administration continuously paints them to be. But it doesn't have to be like that. Remember, all of these opinions are my own, but they should be everyone else's. Have a woke Wednesday. Thank you for another Woke Wednesday. Transcripts of entire episodes will be available on the Woke Wednesday website. Episodes are written and produced by Hannah Mason and Trey Leonard of Lenico Entertainment. Episodes are hosted by Hannah Mason and edited by Trey Leonard. All graphics are designed by Anna French,